So as I promised, today we'll talk about memory. And as I also promised, lots of people will be participating. But I want to say a little bit why I decided to choose this topic for the webinar. And I want to start by using this phrase that I really like. God gave us memory so that we might have roses in December. I think it's very romantic. Of course, now in global kind of culture and the global world, we can get roses at any month of the year, but we always have the memory of those roses. You always know what they look like and what they smell like. And that all happens because of memory. All of your childhood memories, all of your work memories, the way you fell in love, the way you, I don't know, started school, all of that is just a part of your life. And we know it, we still remember it only because of this amazing thing that our brain does with memory. And I think it's very fascinating and exciting. And that's why I decided to also let you guys know a little bit about it. And of course, every time we learn, memory is involved. And as a teacher, I need to know how it works, at least a little bit, so that I can teach you guys better and give you some hacks on how to use that and this. So memory is important. But I know you are also educated people. You've also probably heard a lot about memory. So tell me, please, what do you know about memory? You can raise your hand if you want to answer the question and speaking, or you can write your answer in the chat. What do you know about memory? What types of memory do you know? Maybe you know that.
Associative.
Sure. You memorize something by building associations, right?
Or some emotion sometimes.
Right, right. Okay. That helps memorize for sure. Okay. Three different types of, yes, short-term memory and long-term memory. There is also answer in the chat. Okay. Not a lot, it's okay. You will know something after today. Anything else? How does memory change with years? When we're children, when we're adults? You know that. Okay. What stages of memory exist? No? Okay, so very good that you're here because we will tell you a little bit about each of these questions today. So yes, there are short-term memory, long-term memory, different other kinds of memories, but we will focus only on the things that we really need. I mean, I'm not a scientist, maybe thank God, or maybe unfortunately. So I don't know all of the big words, like scientific words about it. But what I know and understand, I will try to explain to you in the easy words so that you also could understand it very easily. And I will just talk about the things that we need to know in terms of memorizing the words and learning. So if you want to get more details about this thing, there is a very good course. It's called Learning How to Learn by Barbara Oakley. She's doing it in together, like in a combination with a neuroscientist, Terence, and they have it in free access in Coursera. You can see videos on YouTube. It's very popular. It tells you how your brain works when you're memorizing something. It tells you about how your brain works in the whole learning process. It's connected with procrastination, attention, and other kind of things. So I will take some of the poems that she mentioned in her course, in her videos today for the webinar. But again, I'm not going to give you any deep scientific background about these things. But if you want to find out more about it, you can watch this course. It's very productive as well, very efficient. So what Barbara tells in her videos and what we already told at our webinar is that there are two types of memory. There is a short-term memory. Today we'll call it working memory, and that's what she calls it in her course. And there is long-term memory. We all know that. We all knew that. And basically, the learning happens when these two memories work together. When something from your working memory is put in the long-term memory, and vice versa, when you're trying to remember something from your long-term memory and you put it into your working memory. So the whole learning process is the combination of these two memories working together somehow. You can never just have a long-term memory without the working memory. A little bit later, I'll tell you how they each work separately and together. So imagine that a working memory is like a board in your classroom. I know it's been a while since we were in the office, but maybe some of you still remember there are some boards where you can write with markers. Or maybe when you were in school, you had black boards or green boards or whatever the color they had, when you just needed to write something with the chalk, with the white piece. So imagine that your working memory is just like that. When you need to put something quick on the board, in order to remember it for just 5 to 20 seconds, really, really quickly. Scientists say that working memory process happen in the front part of our brain, and they only have 4 slots. So you can only remember 4 pieces at once. It's not a lot at all. And it only happens at one part of the brain, and that's why it disappears very, very quickly. So working memory is happening, you're using it when you need to remember, for example, the phone number before you write it down. So you have to, several times repeat something, repeat, while you're putting it down on the piece of paper, and you will instantly forget about it. Or when you're trying to remember the word, sometimes you write it down several times or you say it several times. So while you're saying it or writing it down, this is your working memory. Something that is in your brain for just 5 to 20 seconds, very, very easily forgotten. Long-term memory is like a storage. Imagine a big shop, I don't know, like Amazon, for example. They have a huge storage somewhere near New York or Los Angeles. Imagine how many boxes there could be there. Imagine how many things they could be keeping there. Maybe some box is 3 years old. Maybe some box is 20 years old, and it's so far away that nobody knows that it's even there. So sometimes you have some memories that you don't even know that you have. Sometimes you need hypnosis to get those memories, for example. So these kind of memories are kept in your long-term memory. That's why there are lots of places in your brain where these memories could be kept. Just like in the storage, you can put a box on the top shelf, on the bottom shelf, far away, closer to you, doesn't matter. It's connected to different emotions, different senses that you're using to memorize things. So there are many options of how you can memorize these things in order to put it into your long-term memory. And of course, these memories are very strong. They can be kept in your brain forever, for many years, if you do your job and memorize these things very well. So this is like a storage. But again, some things can be easily lost if you don't know where they are. So you need to put these boxes very organized. You need to know the place for each of this box, for each of your memory, in order to get it very quick. If you don't do that, it won't be easy to remember things. But we'll talk about it in more details also later. So You guys were right. Working memory and long-term memory, they're the only two things we need to know about the types of memories, and they're the only two things that are working while we're studying. And now I asked you about stages of memory in the beginning. So here I have a picture. What happens? What do you think happens at each of this stage? So, sorry, we have attention. This is the first one. We have encoding, comes from the word code. The second one, storage, just like in the long-term memory, you saw this picture, that's a storage. And we have retrieval. The word retrieve means to take it from somewhere very, very long, somewhere very, very far, and bring it right here where you can see it, for example. So that is retrieval. So maybe you know, or maybe you can guess about what happens at each of this stage. Let's check. So here is a QR code. You can scan it and write your ideas, or you can open this link in the chat. And there you go. So I'll give you maybe 4 or 5 minutes to write your answers, and we will then look at them together. Okay, so you can, if you join just a bit later, you can scan the QR code, or you can open the link from the chat and answer the questions. Okay, I started guessing the first answers. Good, guys. You still have a few minutes to finish. Hey guys, we'll start discussing in a minute, so finish up. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen on here, just on the answers. Can you see the Microsoft Forms? Send me some reactions if you do. Yay, okay, good. So what happens at the stage attention? Preparing some chemical processes, okay. We use our words, we get some external information. We're looking at something. Basically, yes, in most cases, we're looking at something or we're listening to something, yeah. Information gets to our memory, yes. That's where concentration and perception happens, absolutely correct. Listening or looking at something, yes. Short-term memory activates, starting to be ready to accept new information. Exactly. Yes, concentrate on the topic, focus, paying attention. Exactly. So most of your comments are very similar, and I definitely agree with them. And I will tell you a bit more in details what happens on the stage in just a second. But yes, attention, the name speaks for itself. That's when you're starting to pay attention to this information that you need to memorize. Encoding. Most of us, or some of us, work in IT. So when we hear code, we imagine some zeros and ones. Yeah. So basically, create connections, associations. We put on the shelf of words we don't use, understand. Basically, encoding data happens. Convert into format. I don't know this format. I'm not in IT. Maybe there is a format somewhere, but yeah, well, definitely, yeah, you convert some kind of information into some kind of format. I agree with you. The information is translated to memory language. I really like that. Yes. Understanding, saving information, memorize as possible as you can, like associations or other activities. Yes, absolutely. Associating again with other memories, yes, marking or building associations, so trying to find the links to something, etc., etc., etc. Yes, the word again speaks for itself. You're trying to code this information into whatever code is comfortable for your brain, your memory. For some people, it's sounds. For some people, it's tactile, for example, feelings. For some people, it's colors and visual activities, etc., etc. So you do whatever you need to put this information into some code, which your brain will get better and faster. That's exactly what you do here. You know, we'll talk about it in more details again in just a second. The next stage was storage. What happens at storage? And again, you all know what the storage is. We all saw the pictures. That's where you save data. Well, something, maybe you don't do anything, but your brain does something. Information is put to the right place. Exactly. That's where you're, oh, yeah, remembering, but the whole process is about remembering things. That's when you put the information in your storage in the necessary part of your brain where you think it should be. I agree with that. Long-term memory starts processing associated data by creating new links in the long-term memory. Probably, yes. a brain tries to shape it in an understandable type. I think that happens in encoding, but the place for this interesting type and understandable type, yes, is found at this stage. Okay, and the last one, retrieval. Some of you think it's search. Well, I think, yeah, it happens. The search definitely happens at retrieval. Trying to find words to use them when you speak, for example, yes. Trying to get information from your memory, from your long-term memory, absolutely. That's when we can actually use the information that we know and say it, for example, yes. Getting needed memory in time, exactly. Output, so the results of your memorizing, also true. Representing what you remember, translation of the words, yes. The long-term memory tried to dig out the needed information by means of association, yes, or other techniques, absolutely. So finding requires information. That's what I agree with. Again, most of the answers had similar ideas, and I definitely agree with that. So you guys already know lots of the things, and you told me you don't know anything, and you know something apparently. In any case, some information can be known, but at least maybe it's not structured. So let me structure it a little bit for you. And again, see what happens at each of this stage. So we start with attention, of course. And this nice lady, what she's doing, she is at her English lesson, for example, on some intermediate language course. And she's using her computer, she's drinking her tea, and she's not focusing on her emails or Teams chats or Telegram chats, right? See, she's only thinking about English at this point. No other matters are stealing her attention, because this is exactly what happens at the attention stage. If you don't pay attention to only this information that you need to remember, the memorizing process will not happen. If you're at your English lesson and you're answering your emails that are very urgent and very necessary, it's okay, but you will not remember anything from the lesson. If you're learning some song and you start watching a TV show, you will not remember the song because you're not paying attention to the song. So the first and foremost, at this stage, you have to actually pay attention to whatever you're trying to memorize, not paying attention to other things, like this girl. She's only learning English here, not doing anything else. And you were right. That's when you have to concentrate, focus, and not allow anything to disturb you. Next is encoding. And again, you were right that you're finding whatever code, whatever format, I don't know, PDF or DOC or Excel, whatever format you like and you prefer, and you put it in this format into your head. For me, for example, when I learn something, I need to write conspects, I need to write notes, and I need to use different colors, different markers, different stickers, whatever is colorful, and I like see it instantly. I see the yellow color, I know this word is here. I see the pink color, I know that word is here, etc., etc. For some people, encoding goes through the voicing, through the saying of something. Remember when in school you needed to learn a poem and you would repeat it many, many, many times. Roses are red, diamonds are blue, blah, blah, blah. Yes, so you say it. This is your coding. By using your voice, by saying it, by hearing it, you remember it. Fine. Some people can just watch a video and listen to something and memorize this information also. So by listening, it's also fine for them. Because whatever works, associations, as many of you have mentioned today, whatever works in this case, it's your own code, it's your own memory language, again, as some of you said, which you use to to store this information for the later. See, this girl is trying different things. She is putting information in the cloud, or she's using a server or her tablet or some computer folder, like local folders, etc., etc., etc. So you just choose, and whatever works for you is fine. This actually is where our information is transported from working memory into the long-term memory. So when you're encoding, for example, writing down the notes in different colors, you're using your working memory to remember the words, to remember the information. And through the colors, through the writing, through whatever code you're using, you're putting this information into the long-term memory. And that's where the connections on the biological level start happening at this stage. And the next stage is storage. It's pretty obvious that this is important to keep the storage organized, as I already told you before. And you organize it again in your own way. For example, when you learn the words, you learn them by the topic. So today we'll learn all of the food words. So you will find the place in your head, in your brain, where all of the food words that you already know are located, and then you connect the new words, with the same place in your brain. Or, for example, you're watching a film that you really like in English for the first time. You translate the words from there, and now all of these new words will be in the same place in your brain, in the same storage box as this film. So next time when you think about film, you know these words are also there in this box, in this storage. They say that for men, their brain works in boxes. So you have a box for everything, and it's very organized. So maybe it's true. So I hope you have a box for English words, and they're also very, very organized in there. They say that for women, it's much harder to keep their thoughts and their brains organized because we have a lot of topics that we think about at the same time, and it's a mess and it's very emotional. But we have our own way of organizing our storage, and everything is connected. And we can also easily find the memory from 20 years ago, for example, that we remember with our heart. So your storages could be different. They could look like boxes. They could look like a bunch of wires that don't have any organization, but for you they do. But again, at the stage of learning, at the stage of memorizing, you need to know where to put this information, what to associate it with, in order to keep it clean and organized. And finally, retrieval stage. Very best example that you can see here on the picture is when you have an English test at the end of the course, and you have to retrieve all of the information that you learned during a year. That's when retrieval comes. Retrieval is successful when all of the previous stages are successful. If you paid attention, if you used the good and correct and comfortable code, and if you found the right place in the storage. In this case, if all of the three previous stages are good and successful, your retrieval will be easy and you will get an A. And this is how it works. In another situation, what happens? You watched some TED Talk 5 years ago. And in that TED Talk, they said that to have a successful, for example, startup, you have to have a perfect timing. Why do you know this information? Why do I know it? So it's a true TED Talk. Very interesting. Why do I know this information? Because actually I paid attention. I put it in the like a code and in the necessary place. And now I can retrieve and share it with you and sound smart because I know something about startups. So in every conversation that you have with your friends, with your family, you need to retrieve some memories. And this is happening at this stage. So now you know some theoretical things about memory that help you learn effectively if you keep it all organized and well. Oh, and I forgot to say that this is when you take some information from your long term memory, put it into your working memory, and say it, for example, or write it in your test. Yeah. So, again, learning is all about connection between these two types of memories. And again, theoretical part of the memory and memorization. But you all joined this webinar to actually find out some practical tips that I have for you to memorize new words better. Because when you learn another language, this is the hardest part. For me personally, when I was 7 years old and I started learning English, I could remember, I think, 50 words per day. Now I'm lucky, and I'm learning German right now. I'm lucky if I can remember 5 words per day, and probably I will forget these words in 2 days again. So I'll have to remember them again later. And I know all of the tricks and trips. Yeah. And hacks that I shared with you. So unfortunately, the older we become, the more help we need to memorize new words and other information. Vocabulary is the hardest, I think, part in terms of memorization because some of the words don't make sense. Some languages don't have the same words as we have in our native languages, for example. So, this is where you have to use any hacks you can get to remember the words better. But if all of you joined this webinar and if all of you understand me, it means that you're at some stage of your learning process when you already know a little bit of English, at least to understand me and to understand what I'm saying and to answer my questions in English. So it means you probably already have some tips and tricks on how to memorize new words better. I think you already have some personal vocabulary that you somehow managed to remember. So, who'd like to share their tips with us? Again, if you want, you can raise your hand and answer the question, or you can write it in the chat. Okay, Igor shares associations. Okay. One of the tricks. True. What else? Repeat lots of times. Okay, good. Repetition. Different context. Exactly. Yes. Good point. Come on, don't be shy. You can say something if you want. Learn the phrases instead of words. That's true. That's actually something called lexical approach. You can read about it a lot online. It's about remembering not just the word, but the whole part of the sentence where this word is used. Yeah. Memory garden method. Volodymyr, can you share? I've never heard it before. Maybe you can say a few words about it.
It's like when you're entering a garden, you know very well, and you start from the path you go, and on every tree you put some association with the object you should remember, and when you entering it another time, you can exactly tell which object is would be the next and the next. So you remember the sequence of objects you need to remember. That's it.
Oh, very nice. So do you use do you use some kind of mind maps for that?
No, you
Do you
just
draw?
use the associations and imagine yourself walking in the garden. Yeah,
So
something
like
like that.
everything is connected. Nice, nice. I'm sure you can also read online about it, yeah?
Maybe.
Okay. So Ilya shares that using some special applications such as Anki Web, yes, and I will give you some more examples of such applications that I like, and maybe Ilya can share his feedback about Anki because I personally didn't use it much. Maybe at that stage, tell us about it. Okay, Igor says that he tries to describe something with several different phrases. Again, yes, this is very good because again, you find the storage for the new words together with these phrases. That's why our courses, for example, all of my students know we don't translate into our native language. We try to explain with the vocabulary and the phrases we already know so that we can create association and a good storage place for these words. Good. Natalia shares that it works only repeating in voice multiple times in a context. Very good. So first context, good storage place, and using your voice to encode this. Lots of people have the same types of memory when they have to repeat. That's fine. Dmitro says incorporate learning process into daily routine. Exactly. That's what I tell again all of my students all the time. Every time you go for a smoke, if you smoke, you should take your flashcards with you with the new words. Every time you drink coffee, you should take your flashcards with you. But it's good point. For example, you study some words before you go to bed or right when you wake up. So connect something that you do every day with memorization. Good point. Anything else, guys? Only supporting each other. Good. Already there are lots of good ideas. Maybe you'd like to share at the stage of me giving my tips to you. But I would just agree with you, and most of my tips are the same that you've already mentioned. And again, I will just help you structure them and put them into numbers because you can count. I will give you 10 tips that I think work. And I will also give you some comments to the tips that I received from the other people who had the same webinar. So we'll see. So the first tip, and it's connected to the attention stage, is to choose interesting and relevant words. I think it's obvious, but lots of people forget about it. Every time we watch some films in English, we want to translate every word from this film and remember it. And sometimes you don't need this complicated words from, for example, Game of Thrones or Harry Potter. Every time you read a Harry Potter book, you don't need to know what the magic wand is because we don't have them in real life. So it has to be relevant and necessary for you. Of course, sometimes these words are also interesting because they help you understand the context of the book and the film. But again, it has to gather and keep your interest and attention because by looking at this picture, if you have interest and desire, you will have attention. If it's not interesting for you, you will not pay attention to the subject. If you come to a course where they teach you to cook and you don't like cooking, you probably will not be very successful in this course because you don't have interest in that subject. So the same goes for filtering, for example, information. When you study some course, you need to understand which information and which words from this course do you need for your job or for your life situation, especially if you study in bigger groups, for example. Usually the teacher, for example, if you do a course, the teacher will give you the words that more or less fit your occupation, your work. But sometimes you have to go through the filtering process yourself. If you're doing the self-study, you have to decide what's interesting for you. Again, it all depends on the level. For higher levels, it's enjoyable to learn the higher and more interesting and more complicated, words. For lower levels, it's not necessary. So it's all about keeping attention by keeping your interest. If it's interesting, if it's enjoyable, you will do it every day. You will pay attention to this. This is my first tip and my main point. Okay. The second tip is don't learn too many words in one day. Because again, and it's connected to our attention stage of the memory, if you have 100 words that you need to memorize in 2 hours, you will probably lose attention very quickly. Your brain is not a machine. It's very powerful, but it still has limits. So you need to filter and choose just the relevant words, and you have to have normal deadlines to remember these words, and you have to just understand that your brain probably will memorize only 10 words a day, like studies show. You might memorize 30 words during the lesson and then forget 20 in an hour, and then forget 5 more until tomorrow. It's connected to the forgetting curve of the brain. So basically, 10 words a day is a normal pace of remembering something, at least from the studies that I read. It is all dependent on how your memory works, how fast of a learner you are, but generally, yeah, those are the general rules. Guys, if you have some comments during my tips, you're welcome to raise your hand or to write some comments in the chat if you want. All right, then I'm moving on to the next tip. As a lot of you joined, already mentioned that today, using flashcards, it's a good idea, especially now that we have so many applications and websites with flashcards. The ones that I used and my students told me about are Memrise and Quizlet and Anki and Drops. This one is relatively new, I think. It's created by Kahoot Company. All of these websites here, they are using different methods of different kinds of memory. So if you're an audio person, you will hear the words. You can also repeat it and record yourself. You can write it down. You can just use flashcards. You can have pictures. You can have colors. So any kinds of things that are comfortable for you. Memrise has the ready-made sets for you, as well as drops. Quizlet is where you can make your own sets. That's what we use at our courses, because the teacher creates the sets for you and you're just using the things that you learned at the lesson. I think Anki is the same way, but again, I've never used it before. And there are many, many, many more of those. If you don't like computers and learning through computers, there are some flashcards you can buy in the shops, that on one side you have the English word, for example, on the other side you have either translation or explanation, whatever. You can just take the normal stickers of different colors, stick notes, and write your words on them. Some of my friends even used the tape, this paper tape where you can write in different colors. So you can just take a black marker, write a word on the tape, and put it on your desk, on your wall, whatever you want. So any way that's comfortable for you. The only idea is one card should have one word, and one side of the card should only have the word. So all of the translations, explanations, etc., it should be on the other side or on the other card. This way, your brain will not kind of focus on the other language or on the other words. It will only focus on the word that you need to memorize. So some of you mentioned that they're using Anki or other applications here. Do you guys want to comment, or maybe some other resources for flashcards?
Well, I wrote that I use Anki because to the present moment I have known only this.
Okay.
Frankly speaking. What else to add?
Can you add
there are...
words? Sorry.
What?
Can you add words there by yourself?
Yes, I can.
Cool.
Also, you can, how to say, to group words for example, you may have deck phrasal verbs, you may have deck, I don't know, translate this sentence, etc. And also
Okay.
there are applications for Windows, iOS, Android, or if you prefer to use web, you can just go to the website and use it.
Nice.
But
Okay.
how to say it? Application, for example, on Windows, it has more functionalities than web version.
Thank you for sharing. Good to know. Anyone else wants
Could
to
you
add?
please
Mhm.
could you please in chat the name of this application? Thank you.
I think we will prepare some kind of a follow-up, like a PDF or something, where you will have all of the tips and all of the things that you need for these tips, including these names of applications. Okay. Maybe within a few
Thank you.
days, we will send it to you guys. Yeah. Right? Any other comments, questions? Okay, let's move on. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. If you want to add something, you can add it later. And if you have some questions, guys, you can make notes and ask me at the end as well. So the next thing, and it's already, we've moved to the stage of encoding, and I'm going to tell you about what works for me. I like to use colors. When I create flashcards, for example, or when I make my notes, or when I put my words in some applications, I always use colors. They give the best associations possible. You don't even know it, but you will remember this word better if it's colored. I read some studies that if you, for example, take some book of biology, for example, and you need to remember these facts. So you take some marker and you highlight some important information. So your brain is likely to remember the highlighted information and 10% of the text around this highlighted information in whatever color you're using. So colors help you remember things. That's a well-known fact. What they do in, for example, some other languages, English is not that difficult in that case, but for example, what they do in German, in my course book, maybe some of you also study with those books, they give different colors to different genders. For example, the words for women, feminine, gender, are colored in red. For masculine, for men's gender, they're covered in blue, and for neutral, like it, they're covered in green color. And then throughout the book, all of the words are in those different colors. So this way, it's easy for you to remember the gender of the words. You don't even have to think about it. You have the color for it, so you know what it means. And then we use the same colors in flashcards and Quizlet, etc., and it really helps. I can tell you from my personal experience. But again, if you make flashcards, it's very easy. Just choose like a different color of the sticker for a different word. Even if you play with your children and you need them to remember something, colors are much more fun, and they will enjoy writing these words in different markers and different colors, and you will enjoy that too as well. And it's a huge benefit and profit for your memory as well. Another thing you can do to encode your words better is to make word clouds. It's something that you see here on the picture, and there are so many options how you can do this online. Just write down make word cloud in Google and write down all of the words that you need to be in this cloud. Then you can choose the words that are maybe more important for you. You can make them bigger and closer to the middle. Maybe the words that you need to remember better, or maybe the words that you don't know at all. You make them bigger. The other words, you make them smaller, whatever. Usually, we put the words of the same topic in the same word cloud, or maybe the words from the same film with the same context in one word cloud. Because again, you will probably remember these words together, and they will be stored together later. So you have to, in order to keep it organized and find a better place for it in your brain, you put the words that you should associate together in one word cloud, and it works. If you're doing it manually with your pen and paper, again, any piece of paper, different colors, and you write down the words. You can put it on your wall, on your, I don't know, laptop, whatever. It doesn't have to be many. It could be 5 words together, but in just random order, in random size. That should work very well. Again, building associations and storing them organized. And very closely connected to that tip is my next tip of connecting the words to places. This is something, well, that I've never heard anybody else do except for me. And it was like the most surprising for most of my, students and friends. But I'm the kind of person who associates the words with the places where I learn them or where I hear them. For example, I'm listening to some audiobook and I'm walking down the street somewhere in Kiev, for example, on Maidan Nezalezhnosti, let's say, and I hear this new word so in this audiobook, so I will just grab my phone, translate it or explain it and remember it. And then next time when I'm on that place, Maidan Nezalezhnosti, I will think about this word. That's how I remember it. That's just my thing. I'm studying in, for example, kitchen. I know that I was sitting at this table when I learned this word. So next time I sit at this table, I will remember this word. For some people, of course, it doesn't work this way as it works for me, but you can use this technique as you can see here on the picture. You can put a sticker or you can put your flashcard on just at any random place in your apartment or in your house. For example, you put the word, it doesn't have to be a fridge. You put the word spectacular, if you want to remember, on your fridge. Just because, I don't know, maybe it has some association for you, maybe not, it doesn't matter. But every time you open the fridge, you will see this card. You will see the word spectacular. Even if this card disappears and falls down and you throw it away, in a week or 10 days later, you will come to the fridge, you'll think about this card, you'll kind of visualize it at this place, and you'll remember this word every time you open the fridge for the next few days, at least after that. So this is how you can use your own house, your own apartment, to memorize these words, using stickers, using markers, using, I don't know, whatever works for you, honestly. As I said, tape, scotch tape, whatever is fine. It works for me. I don't know, maybe it works for you. You can share with me later if you're going to use this tip. It's one of the ways to make associations, connecting it to the places. And another very, very closely connected to that is to connect the words to context. As many of you have mentioned, you already do that. Very good example is when you watch a film, you don't know the word. For example, you watch Game of Thrones and you learn the words from there. Or like it happened to me, it very rarely happened at this point that some old films that I watched before in English had new words, but it happened to me when I watched this film Groundhog's Day, and there was a word blizzard in there, which means snowstorm. So that's how I remembered this word, connected to this part of the film that you see here in the picture. And now every time somebody tells me about this film, or I hear about this actor, or I see his face somewhere, I remember the word blizzard. Or, for example, I always tell this funny story from my childhood. At my English lesson, we learned a text about Bill Gates, and we had to, remember this text and tell it to our teacher. So our my classmate, he stood up And very, very proudly, he said that Bill Gates went to Harvard. And he said it like Bill Gates went to Harvard. And it was very funny. And we all remembered a lot of words from this text because of his pronunciation, because of this context, you know. So every time that somebody gives me a word, for example, pants, you know, the casual trousers, this word was in this text. And every time somebody says pants, I remember that text. It's 20 years since that time, but that's how my memory works. It is connected to the context, to that exact classmates, to that exact book and that exact text where I learned the word pants, because Bill Gates went to Harvard. So sometimes context really helps. And this is also a good way to find a good storage place for your words. You don't have to worry so much where to put them mentally in your head. You already have the context. You know that you put them together with this film or together with this text, for example, which you read. My next tip is connected also to my story about this friend. I think partially why I remember the word pants wasn't only because of the text and the context, but also because it was funny how my friend said it in my classmate. So every time it's funny and you laugh, or it's pleasant and you're happy, or it's sad and you're crying, every time you feel some emotions, you will remember this word better. I think women understand that better than anybody else, because all of our memories are there. 20 years ago, I remember what happened because I have emotions. We have very strong emotions, and that's why we're strongly connecting things to our emotions every time. That's why they say that your wife always remembers this fight when you didn't wash the dishes, because she had a lot of emotions about it. So let's use these emotions to remember the words better. But even if it's not connected to some, you know, strong emotions that you felt, you can still personalize the words and create emotions. For example, when you create a flashcard, this is example of how I create flashcards in Quizlet. You can choose a color, as I said before. Here, the word is picturesque. You can choose different font. You can make it bold or in italics or underlined. For example, I choose bold to write a definition. It's visually attractive. So what happened is that I explained this word using a synonym and built a connection and association with another word, another phrase. And I also used colors to make me feel something and memorize this word better. And I also put an example from my personal life. Dima, it's my husband, and I enjoyed such a picturesque view from the hot air balloon in Cappadocia. So I have personal memory about this word. I created emotions for myself. What I did, I also created an exercise that will help me practice and revise this word later, because I skipped it in my example. That's what I often do in flashcards. So if you write an example, skip the word to make it harder for yourself. And I also added a picture. Ideally, it's a photograph that you have from the real event which you're using to personalize. If not, just any picture that makes you, again, visualize and feel the emotions and remember this amazing feeling when I was in the air balloon with my husband, we were kissing, blah, 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 things like that. So personalize, create emotions, and combine different other techniques whenever you create the cards and make examples. On this stage, some of my students told me that you could use ChatGPT to create some examples for you, for example. So if you don't want to personalize a lot and create emotions for that, you can ask ChatGPT to create examples for you, and this way you will have a context for the word, you will have a definition for the word, and you will have a ready-made exercise if you want to practice this word later. You can ask ChatGPT to make funny sentences to make you feel emotions. You can ask him to find some real life sentences from people online who used this word and use those as context as examples. So, robots can make your life easier in this way, and ChatGPT could be used for those reasons as well. But it's still better if you create flashcards by yourself because you can make colors and fonts and other things. Again, you spend time now, but you will not waste this time later for revision. Okay. Another thing for people just like I think Natalia shared with us that she likes to, she needs to repeat the word several times in order to remember it. In Quizlet, again, this is example from Quizlet, you can record your own voice by saying this word. Or you can record yourself when you're giving a definition of this word or whatever you want in the other side of the card. For example, you can say the example with this word by recording yourself. So you're saying the word and you remember it better. What's more, this audio that you just recorded will be saved with this card. So, for example, tomorrow, when you open this card again, you can listen to your own voice and revise this word. And again, repeat it and say it again and remember this word better if you have this type of memory and if it's comfortable for you. So those were all of the tips connected to encoding and storing of your memories. So those two stages of memory. Do you guys have any comments? Let me go back a slide a little bit. Do you have any comments about any other things you can do to encode or to store the new words better in your head? Do you want to comment or share? I see a comment that it won't work for people with color blindness. That's true, of course, but there are other kinds of things they can do. Olga, did you want to comment something?
Yes, I can comment that for me personally works better when I learn the whole phrase again in the context and of course repetition, but from I don't know, when you have a base already, it's more effective to learn by phrases, common and mostly usable phrases, not let's say single words. Even it's a flashcard, I think it's not so effective in comparison with phrases which you use in your daily or not daily speaking when you speak especially.
Okay. Yeah, I totally agree. If this is a phrase that you need to memorize, you do the same thing, but instead of picturesque, you just put, for example, picturesque view of the ocean. And the same thing, you're just not skipping just one word in the example, but you're skipping several words to make a ready-made phrase for you. Yes.
And another thing here is that a word can have really a lot of senses and definitions. So it maybe it works well for simple words like apple is always apple, but other words really have a lot of definitions, and flashcards do not work for them well.
I would say that you just put one definition, one meaning of the word on the flashcard, because it would not work very well if you have if you learn all the definitions for one word at once. Again, we're learning the words connected with the context, usually, at least a topic, the same topic or the same like text where you took it from. You should only take the word in the meaning that you saw it initially. You saw it in the text, or that you saw it in the book, for example. So only that meaning. If you if you want to learn all the meanings of the words, okay, you can do that, of course. But again, group them with another set of words. So that's better. Don't learn all of the meanings of the words at once. Doesn't usually help you with the memory. Very well. Okay.
I agree.
Ola,
Yes.
anything else?
No, nothing from my side.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Right, guys, so we'll just move on to the last tip that I have, but I think it's the most important one, and it's connected to the retrieval stage. And this is the way how you can involve your working memory and your long-term memory at the same time, kind of. And remember, keep remembering the word forever, for a longer time than just 2 days or 2 hours. So it's something called spaced repetition. Maybe you heard it before. If you attended my colleague's webinar about phrasal verbs, she also talked about it a little bit. It's the idea that you repeat the words a little bit every day on the regular spaces of time, the regular intervals of time. And then this connection of these words will be stronger, and the connection in your memory will be stronger. For example, like Barbara Oakley says in her course, if you're building a brick wall and you're putting the first layer, you need to give some time for this layer to dry. Because if you put all of the layers together without giving them intervals of time to dry, the wall is going to fall, or at least it won't be as stable as it should be. So I don't know if you're ever built a wall. I haven't, but at least it looks logical, yeah, to give some time for the new layer to dry before you put on the other one. And that's what spaced repetition is all about. If we talk a bit about science, you know that whenever you learn something, you memorize something, the brain builds the new neuron connections. And to build this connection, your brain gives some protein, so some building material for these connections. And every day, if it's necessary, your brain gives more protein to this connection, and it gets stronger and stronger every day. But if you don't revise the word, if you don't retrieve it from your long-term memory, your brain just doesn't think that this information is very important, and it doesn't prioritize it, and it doesn't give any protein to that space anymore. And with the time, this connection just breaks and disappears. So you need to show your body, your brain, this word is important. I learned it yesterday, I learned it today, I will learn it tomorrow and a little bit next week. So it's important because I do it every day, and it needs building material to build this connection. That's why you use spaced repetition to revise the words. There are different examples. You can learn a little bit about the forgetting curve online. Again, you can Google it very, very easily. It usually appears when you Google about spaced repetition. And this is what science says. So let's imagine that here I am at my English lesson and I learned a new word. Let's take picturesque, view of the ocean, a new phrase. Yeah, if you want. And now I remember it at 100%. Tomorrow, when I wake up, I will remember it already at 60%. In 2 days, it will be 20%, and in 3 days, 0%. It will simply disappear. But if I learn it today at the lesson, I wake up tomorrow and I do my homework from the lesson, for example, see, it goes back to 100%. Then, for example, in 3 days, I come back to the lesson and revise it together with my teacher. And then, for example, in a week or in 3 days, I again revise it when I prepare for the test or for some exam. This way, you see how this curve is getting smaller and smaller every time. So the more these repetitions you have, the longer your forgetting process will be. And if you, for example, revise it for the test in a month, it will be again to 100%, and you will probably remember this word forever. If you don't have an English course where it's already implemented, you can just build the schedule very, very easily by yourself. There are lots of tricks. In just a second, I'll tell you about it. But just remember this curve and how it looks like. So if you don't do your homework, or if you don't revise the word the next day, this is where it goes. 3 days, it goes to 0. Here's some more example. That in 1 hour you forget 56% of information. So all of the 10 tips that you remember now, in 1 hour, you will remember only 5 tips from this webinar. In 1 day, you will forget 66%, and in 6 days, it goes to 75 of forgettable information. It depends on the words. It depends on how complicated they are. It depends on the information. Maybe it's grammar. Maybe it's some information from your meeting in the business office or whatever. So, of course, it differs from the type of things you're trying to remember. But basically, all of the other tips that we discussed, colors, associations, context, flashcards, they will not work if you don't revise the words. They will help, but they will not work. So how you can use this spaced repetition? You can use some techniques. There are some schedules you can build, for example, to memorize quickly or to memorize for the first time. And you can put this in your calendar. You can use different reminders on your phone to remind you to forget to revise these words. And of course, it's easier to do with the flashcards because this is a good way to retrieve information. It's better if you take the cards and practice with them, or even play with the games on Quizlet or Memrise or Anki or whatever. Then you just look at your notes in your notebook. Yeah, but you can ask ChatGPT, please help me revise these words. Give him 10 words and they will create some exercises for you. This is another way to revise the words. Or you can do this thing old-fashioned way, as you can see here on the picture. So the idea is that, again, you write and you see they drew some flashcards, they made some associations. I would, of course, make them colorful, but it's your choice. So you put the words that you don't know in the first box. You have to revise them every day. The next box is every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The other box is once per week, then every 2 weeks, bi-weekly. And the other one is review before the test or review every month, for example. You can change it in whatever you want. So these words from the first box, for example, you remember the words, again, picturesque, the phrase picturesque view of the ocean. You revised it today, and you are allowed to put it in the box number 2. Then the words from box number 2 will eventually go to box number 3, and so on and so forth. So you're just putting these cards in the next box until you remember them very, very well. And you don't have to review them at all. But every time you make a mistake or you don't remember the word, it should go back to box number 1. That's the main idea. Maybe it's a bit complicated. Again, my explanation is not perfect in this case because there are so many websites that already implemented the schedule and they're using their own like spaced repetition technique. For example, in Quizlet, there is some algorithm called Learn, and they will also give you like 5 or 7 words each day that you need to memorize from this set. And every couple days, they will bring back the older words that you already studied. For example, 3 days before, but you have to study them today. The same happens, if I'm not mistaken, in Anki. The same happens in Drops. So this schedule is already implemented in the games there. Also, you can set the time of your test. If you have to prepare for the test, you can set that I need to remember these words before Friday 28th. And they will send you reminders and remind you that you need to revise these words today at 2 o'clock, or you will forget 75% of everything. And basically, this is what spaced repetition is about. And as I said, it's, I think, the most important tip from all 10 that I've shared with you. And now you understand why.